The command deck of the Imperial Dominion starship gleamed with floating holograms, each one representing a star system conquered over the last 6 millennia. Supreme Commander Vexthor observed the mapped galaxy before him with his 4 vertical eyes, his grey skin etched with honorary scars from 3 centuries of service. Around him, officers from a dozen subjugated species worked at their consoles, the silence broken only by the low hum of the life support systems. An amber light flashed on the central console. The intelligence officer, a reptilian being from Kepler 442, approached with reverent steps. Supreme Commander, the High Council, has approved the next target for expansion. Vexthor did not look away from the holograms. In 600 years of command, he had overseen the conquest of 417 systems. Each one had been integrated into the Empire with mechanical efficiency. Resistance was futile when facing a civilization that had mastered warp drive for millennia. Coordinates? Sector 347. G2V classification star, local designation, Sol system with 8 major planets, 4 rocky. The inhabitants call themselves humans. The term sounded strange in the Imperial tongue. Vexthor finally turned, his eyes focusing on the officer. Tactical analysis? The reptilian activated a new hologram. A small blue and green sphere floated in the air, surrounded by numerical data. Young species, Commander, only 1,200 years since their first organized civilization. Warp drive technology for only 120 standard years. They have colonized 42 systems. Total population estimated at 78 billion, distributed across 16 habitable worlds. Vexthor processed the numbers with the coldness of one who had seen these reports hundreds of times. 78 billion. The Empire counted its citizens in the trillions. Military capability? Primitive. Defense fleets in 17 major systems. Weaponry technology based on accelerated kinetic projectiles and second-generation particle beams. Primary energy shields, efficient only against meteorites and cosmic radiation. A nearby officer, an insectoid creature from Tau Ceti, emitted a sound that the universal translation technology interpreted as mocking laughter. With all due respect, Commander, this shouldn't even be classified as a military operation. It's administrative work. Vexthor did not share the humor. He had learned, over the centuries, that underestimating any species was the first step toward defeat. But the data did not lie. Humans had barely left their stellar cradle when the Empire already dominated galaxies. Biological characteristics? The intelligence officer switched the holograms. The image of a bipedal being, pink-skinned and strangely lacking scales or carapace, materialized in the air. Vexthor studied the creature with clinical interest. Biologically fragile, Commander. Life expectancy of only 80 to 100 standard years. No natural claws, no venom, no exoskeleton. Limited thermal resistance. Critical dependence on specific oxygen, and most relevant for tactical operations. Completely absent of psychic abilities. This last piece of information made Vexthor raise his auditory crests. Among known spacefaring races, the absence of psychic capacity was rare. Even the most primitive species developed some level of telepathy or precognition upon reaching the stars. They are mentally deaf? Totally, Commander. Their brains operate in complete isolation. They cannot detect psychic fields, they cannot communicate telepathically, and they possess no mental interface with their machines. Everything is manual or via primitive vocal command. The command room fell silent for a moment. Then, starting with the insectoid officer, a wave of sounds that the translator interpreted as guffaws swept the room. Even Vexthor allowed himself a brief tremor of his broad shoulders. A race without a psyche. It was like finding a spacefaring species that still breathed water. Strategic recommendation? Vexthor asked, regaining his composure. The High Council orders a demonstration of force to ensure immediate surrender. Peaceful annexation protocols are in effect. Avoid unnecessary civilian casualties to preserve the workforce. Vexthor nodded. It was standard procedure. Most species surrendered when confronted with the true power of the Empire. There was no honor in resisting the inevitable. Designated fleet size? The intelligence officer hesitated for a fraction of a second. The High Council, in its wisdom, has designated a force of 400 warships, including the Annihilator starship, to ensure maximum psychological impact. Silence returned to the command room. 400 ships. The Annihilator. Vexthor had commanded invasions of more advanced systems with only 50 vessels. The Annihilator was a Devastator-class flagship, capable of fragmenting moons with its antimatter cannons. The Council intends to crush an ant with a stellar hammer, Vexthor murmured. Strategic overkill authorized, Commander. The message must be clear. Resistance is suicide. Vexthor studied the hologram of Earth, floating before him again. That small blue world, so similar to Cathara Prime before the conquest. Young civilizations always seemed so full of promise before they understood their true place in the galactic order. Primary target for demonstration: human colony designated New Vancouver in the Epsilon Eridani system, population of 3 million. Far enough from Earth to avoid immediate response, but significant enough to force negotiations. Fleet preparation? 72 hours until full readiness, Commander. The ships are converging from adjacent sectors. Vexthor turned to the panoramic window that dominated an entire wall of the command deck. Outside, in the perfect vacuum, dozens of Imperial warships floated in impeccable formation. Each one represented centuries of refined engineering, power enough to vitrify continents, and they were sending 400. Summon the captains. Full briefing in 6 hours. I want psychological profiles of the human leadership, analysis of their communications, and history of internal conflicts. Every species has a pressure point. We need to find theirs. Understood, Commander. As the officers dispersed to carry out orders, Vexthor remained before the window. He had seen this ritual hundreds of times. A new species, a new conquest, and eventually a new line on the galactic map, marking the expansion of the Empire. But something bothered the ancient part of his mind, the part that had kept him alive through 3 centuries of war. The Council never wasted resources. If they were sending 400 ships for a primitive race, there was a reason. He opened a private channel on his neural implant. Intelligence Archive, priority access. I want all history of prior contact with the species designated humans. Any probe, any merchant vessel, any border incident. The response from the Empire's artificial intelligence was instantaneous and disconcerting. File empty, Supreme Commander. No contact registered in the last 6,000 years of Imperial expansion. Vexthor furrowed his frontal crests. Impossible. The Empire mapped every sector before any expansion. Automatic probes traversed the systems, collecting data, assessing threats. Check again. Authorization code VEXTHOR Alpha 97. A processing silence. Then, confirmed, Commander. No reconnaissance. Data exists for the Sol system or resident species. System was marked as non-priority in all previous surveys. Non-priority, an active technological race, and the Empire had simply ignored them for millennia. Or there was another explanation. VEXTHOR closed the channel and returned his gaze to the darkness of space. Out there, among the stars, secrets waited. And for the first time in the many decades, the old commander felt something he hadn't felt since his first campaign. Uncertainty. The ships continued in formation, awaiting orders. In 72 hours, the fleet would depart for the Sol system. And VEXTHOR, a 300-year veteran, would begin to discover if the humans were just another conquest or something completely different. 72 hours later, the Imperial Armada emerged from hyperspace in perfect synchronization. 400 warships materialized simultaneously at the edge of the Epsilon Eridani system, their hulls reflecting the orange light of the distant star. The formation was impeccable, a wall of steel and antimatter stretching for tens of thousands of miles. At the center of the formation, the Annihilator starship dominated space like a primordial predator. 12 kilometers long, its spear-like structure seemed designed to tear the very fabric of the vacuum. Batteries of antimatter cannons dotted its hull, each capable of releasing energy equivalent to a contained supernova. VEXTHOR watched from the command bridge, his 4 eyes analyzing the data flowing on the holograms around him. The Epsilon Eridani system was young by galactic standards, only 800 million years old. But the humans had transformed the 4th planet into a prosperous world, with cities shining on the surface and orbital stations circling it like artificial jewels. "Tactical report," he ordered. The sensor officer, an amphibious humanoid from Gliese 667, touched his console with webbed fingers. "System mapped, Commander. New Vancouver colony, confirmed on the 4th planet. Population 3.2 million. 17 orbital stations, 143 civilian vessels in transit. Planetary defenses detected 8 weapon platforms in geosynchronous orbit, medium-range missile technology. Defense fleet? Negative, Commander. No military vessels in the system." VEXTHOR allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The humans didn't even maintain a significant military presence in their own colonies. Amateurs. "Communications officer, prepare transmission on all frequencies, standard conquest language, translate it into known human languages." "Prepared, Commander." "Transmit." VEXTHOR's voice echoed through the vacuum, amplified by transmitters that could reach entire systems. "Inhabitants of the Epsilon Eridani system, you are now under the jurisdiction of the Dominion Galactic Empire. By decree of the High Council, this system and all its resources are annexed to the Empire. Resistance will result in severe consequences. Surrender peacefully and your integration will be orderly. You have 1 standard hour to respond." The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of the ship's systems. VEXTHOR waited, counting the seconds. Usually, the response came in minutes. Panic in civilian communications, desperate pleas for negotiation. Sometimes even empty bravado from leaders who still didn't understand their situation. 42 minutes passed without a single transmission. Sensors, full system scan, Are they ignoring us? The sensor officer worked quickly. Negative, Commander. Civilian communications continue normally. No detectable increase in emergency traffic. Orbital stations have not activated evacuation protocols. They aren't seeing us? Vexthor's tone carried incredulity. Impossible, Commander. Our presence in the electromagnetic spectrum is unmistakable. 400 ships generating enough energy to illuminate an entire system. Vexthor felt a pang of irritation. Ignoring the Empire was not just stupid, it was suicidal. A Prozoch, sublight speed, delta formation, I want them to see every inch of this fleet. The Imperial Armada began to move, accelerating smoothly toward the inner planet. Their antimatter engines painted the vacuum with trails of bright blue Cherenkov radiation. It was a spectacle designed to inspire terror. And that's when the sensors detected something. Commander! The sensor officer's voice carried a note of surprise rarely heard among Imperial veterans. Contact emerging from behind the third planet, unique signature, classifying as military vessel. Vexthor felt his pulse quicken. Finally, a response. Size? Small, Commander, approximately 120 meters in length. Estimated mass 12,000 metric tons. A patrol boat, perhaps an escort. Vexthor almost smiled. They were sending a single ship against 400. Visual. The central hologram shifted, magnifying the small vessel that was now moving to intercept the Imperial fleet. Vexthor studied the design with professional interest. The human ship was blade-shaped, sleek and deadly. Its hull was black as the vacuum, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. But what caught Vexthor's attention were the scars. The hull was marked by impacts, energy burns, and makeshift repairs. That ship had seen combat, a lot of combat. Identification? Transponder active. Designation? UNSC Resolute. Class? Frontier Patrol Corvette. Registry? Earth Defense Fleet, 3rd Division, Iridani Detachment. This patrol corvette. Not a ship of the line. Not a battle cruiser. A simple frontier. Patrol boat. Armaments detected. Scanning hampered by unknown armor material, Commander. Detecting at least 6 missile launchers, 2 electromagnetic cannon batteries, and what appears to be a point defense system. Standard armament for a ship of its size. Nothing that posed a threat to a single Imperial vessel, let alone 400. They're trying to intimidate us with a patrol boat? The insectoid officer almost choked on laughter. But Vexthor was not laughing. His 3 centuries of experience screamed a warning. No one sends a single ship against an armada, unless that ship doesn't need reinforcements or it's a lure. Full tactical scan of the system. Look for hidden ships. Cloaking fields. Any anomalous signature. Commander, do it. The sensors swept the system with maximum intensity. Minutes passed. Nothing but civilian traffic and that single black ship calmly approaching the Imperial fleet. System clear, Commander. Only the corvette. Vexthor forced himself to relax. Perhaps the humans were simply suicidal. Some young cultures had distorted concepts of honor. Communication channel open, Commander. The communications officer announced, the human ship is transmitting. On the main screen, the hologram changed, and for the first time, Vexthor saw a live human. The captain of the Resolute appeared in the center of the bridge. She was a female of the species, hair pulled back in a functional ponytail, dark blue uniform with insignia Vexthor did not recognize, but it was her eyes that made him pause. They were blue, like the distant planet, and absolutely calm. No fear, no hesitation, just a disconcerting tranquility. Unidentified fleet. Her voice was clear, every word pronounced with military precision. You have violated space, protected by the Earth Mutual Defense Treaty. Identify yourselves immediately and withdraw beyond the heliopause, or you will be considered hostile. The silence on the Imperial Bridge was absolute. Vexthor felt all eyes on him, awaiting his reaction. He activated the communicator, his voice carrying the full weight of 300 years of authority. I am Supreme Commander Vexthor of the Dominion Galactic Empire. You stand before 400 warships, including the Annihilator starship, capable of fragmenting worlds. This is your only opportunity for surrender. Deactivate your weapon systems and prepare to be boarded. The human captain did not blink, did not hesitate. When she spoke, her voice carried something Vexthor did not expect. Pity. Commander Vexthor, my name is Captain Sarah Chen, UNSC Resolute. Before you proceed, I suggest you carefully consider one question. Question? Vexthor almost spat the word. Yes. The captain's blue eyes stared at him through the hologram. Ask yourself why a single patrol ship was sent to face 400 warships. Ask yourself what that says about our respective capabilities. And with those words, Captain Chen cut the communication. Vexthor stood motionless, processing what he had just heard. It was a bluff. It had to be a bluff. No single ship could face an Imperial Armada. But then, why did doubt crawl up his spine like ice? Commander, orders. Vexthor looked at the small black ship floating in the vacuum, alone against 400. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure what to do next. Vexthor studied the human ship for long seconds, his veteran mind processing possibilities. Bluff. It had to be a bluff. But something in that captain's unwavering certainty deeply unsettled him. Science officer, full scan of the human corvette. I want detailed analysis of energy emissions, hull composition, everything. The science officer, a crystalline being from Sigma Draconis, leaned over his instruments, his multiple faceted eyes refracted the light as he worked. Initiating full spectrum sweep, Commander. Seconds passed, then minutes. Vexthor watched as the science officer's expression changed from professional concentration to confusion, then to something close to alarm. Report, Vexthor demanded. Commander, There is an error in the sensors. There has to be. Explain. The crystalline being touched his console with trembling fingers, projecting data onto the central hologram. Numbers began to appear, and the entire bridge fell silent. The energy signature of the human corvette is reading at... This is impossible. The sensors must be malfunctioning. Officer, I have no patience for inaccuracy. What is the reading? 240 terawatts, Commander. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of several officers checking their own instruments simultaneously. Vexthor felt his 4 eyes focus completely on the crystalline being. Repeat that. 240 terawatts of stable energy output. Commander, to put that in perspective, the Annihilator generates 180 terawatts at maximum combat capacity. This corvette, which is 100th our size, is generating more energy than our flagship. Impossible. The insectoid officer's voice was shrill. Our ship that size cannot contain enough reactors. The data does not lie, the science officer replied, his crystalline voice trembling. And there's more. The hull composition is blocking 92% of our scans. The material does not match any known alloy in the Imperial database, and the scars on the hull, what about them? I analyzed the damage patterns. Commander, some of these burn marks are consistent with antimatter weapon impacts, direct impacts, and the ship is still operational. Vexthor felt something cold run through his circulatory system. Antimatter was the most destructive weapon known. A single direct impact instantly vaporized hull, crew, and internal structure. Are you saying this ship survived attacks that should have annihilated it? Not only survived, Commander, it was repaired and returned to service. Some of these marks are old. This corvette has seen multiple high-intensity engagements. The intelligence officer, the reptilian, approached with additional data projected on his personal tablet. Commander, I reviewed our files on human ship classification. A frontier patrol corvette is considered the smallest class of combat vessel in the UNSC fleet. It is the human equivalent of a training ship or commercial route policing vessel. The information hit Vexthor like a kinetic missile, the smallest class, a frontier patrol boat, and it surpassed the Annihilator in raw energy. If that's a patrol boat, the insectoid officer whispered, what exactly is a human heavy warship? No one answered. Vexthor forced himself to think logically. Energy meant little without armaments to channel it. And a small ship had physical limitations on how many weapons it could carry. Armaments. Science officer, full analysis of offensive capabilities. The crystalline being worked for several minutes before responding. And when he did, his voice carried defeat. Commander, I cannot penetrate its armor for detailed internal scanning, but external analysis confirms 6 missile launchers, estimated capacity of 12 missiles each. 2 electromagnetic cannons on the bow, unknown caliber. Point defense system with at least 20 identifiable emitters. And there is something else. Continue. There is an aperture on the ventral hull that our sensors cannot classify. The shape suggests a weapons system, but it does not match any known design. Whatever it is consuming 80% of the ship's total energy in standby mode. 80%. Vexthor processed that if the ship was generating 240 terawatts and 80% went to a single weapon system, estimate of destructive power, impossible to calculate without knowing the mechanism, Commander, but if we assume efficiency similar to our own weapons, it would be enough to pierce the Annihilator's shields in a single shot. Panic began to infiltrate the bridge. Officers exchanged nervous glances. Some checked and rechecked their instruments, looking for errors that did not exist. Vexthor felt the weight of command pressed down on his shoulders. 300 years of experience told him to retreat, reevaluate, gather more data. But imperial pride, 6 millennia of uninterrupted conquests, demanded that he hold course. Perhaps, he said carefully, the humans invested everything in this single ship. A prototype, a demonstration of force they cannot replicate at scale. It was a weak hope, and everyone knew it. The communications officer interrupted. Commander, Captain Chen is transmitting again. She is sending a data packet, unencrypted, requesting permission to receive. Vexthor hesitated. It could be a virus, a digital weapon. But his curiosity overcame caution. Receive it. Total isolation. No connection to main systems. The packet was downloaded to an isolated terminal. The communications officer opened it, and images began to flow. They were historical records. Low-quality videos, some clearly ancient by human standards, and they showed war, but not war against aliens, war among the humans themselves. Vexthor watched, fascinated and horrified, as the images revealed massive human fleets destroying each other. Thousands of ships, not hundreds. Weapons that tore continents apart, entire cities vaporized in seconds. A voice narrated over the images. Captain Chen's voice. 60 standard years ago, humanity almost destroyed itself. Total civil war, Earth against the colonies, Mars against Europa. We built fleets to annihilate each other. We developed weapons designed not to conquer, but to completely exterminate. The images showed what appeared to be the Sol system. Debris floated in orbit of every inhabited planet. Entire belts of wreckage marked where battles had occurred. We learned to kill each other with an efficiency no alien race ever needed to develop. And when we finally made peace, all that remained was rubble and the deadliest technology we had ever created. The image changed. It showed shipyards, enormous, the size of moons. And in them, ships were being built. Hundreds of them, thousands. And then, 40 years ago, they came. The screen showed alien ships, not imperial, but of unknown design. Organic, twisted, like living creatures of the vacuum. The devoured. A race that conquered by assimilation. They tried to do to Earth what you intend to do today. What followed was a carnage that made even Vexthor recoil. The human fleets, built for fratricidal war, met the devoured with absolute ferocity. There were no elegant tactics. There was no honor. Just systematic and total destruction. It took us 6 months to exterminate every devoured ship in human space. Then we pursued the survivors for 3 years, across 40 systems, all the way to their homeworld. And there, we used weapons as we had sworn never to use again. The final image showed a planet, then a flash of light that obscured the screen. When the view returned, the planet was a sphere of fused glass, still glowing with residual heat. We do not seek Empire, Commander Vexthor. We have no interest in conquering or subjugating, but we are very, very good at one thing: surviving. And we eliminate any threat to our survival with extreme prejudice. The transmission ended. The Imperial Bridge was in absolute silence. Vexthor felt his legs weaken. He had led conquests for 3 centuries. He had seen warrior races, violent species, militaristic cultures, but never in 600 years of life had he seen a race that perfected self-destruction and turned it into defense. Commander, the intelligence officer's voice was hoarse. If this is true, if the humans really eliminated an invading race so completely, then that corvette out there is not an empty threat, Vexthor completed. It is a warning. The Annihilator's bridge remained silent as the human historical data still glowed on the holograms. Vexthor felt the eyes of his crew on him, awaiting orders, awaiting leadership. 300 years of command had not prepared him for this moment. He opened a direct channel to Captain Chen. Captain, your demonstrations are impressive, but history does not win battles. A single ship, no matter how advanced, cannot face 400. The math is simple. Sarah Chen's face reappeared on the hologram. Her blue eyes still carried that disconcerting calm. Commander Vexthor, with all due respect, Your math is based on incorrect assumptions. You calculate numbers. We calculate survival. Pretty words don't deflect antimatter projectiles. No. The captain allowed herself a small smile. But our physics does. Last chance, Commander. Withdraw your fleet. There is no dishonor in retreating in Allah, the face of new information. Vexthor felt anger begin to replace uncertainty. Who did this human think she was? Her race had barely left its home system when the Empire already dominated entire sectors. You are bluffing. You have to be. Perhaps. But are you willing to bet 400 ships to find out? The question hung in the air like a blade. Vexthor looked around, seeing doubt begin to spread among his crew. This could not continue. He was a supreme commander of the Empire. His word was law. Activate combat protocols. All ships. Shields to maximum. Weapons charged. Standard siege formation. Commander! The intelligence officer stepped forward. Perhaps we should... Silence! Vexthor's voice echoed across the bridge. I am the supreme commander of this Armada. 6 millennia of empire will not be intimidated by a race of primitives. He turned back to Chen's hologram. Last opportunity, Captain. Surrender, or be destroyed. Sarah Chen sighed, and for the first time, Vexthor saw something beyond calm in her eyes. Sadness. Then let the records show that I tried to prevent this. The transmission cut. For 5 seconds, nothing happened. The human corvette floated in the vacuum, a small black spot against the stellar backdrop. 400 Imperial ships surrounded it in perfect formation, their cannons charged and ready. Then, 73 captains of the Imperial fleet made a decision that would change everything. Without Vexthor's authorization, without orders from high command, 73 ships broke away from the formation and accelerated toward the human corvette. Perhaps it was pride. Perhaps it was an attempt to prove their own bravery. Perhaps they were simply too young to understand when to retreat. Negative! Negative! Vexthor bellowed into the communicator. All ships, hold positions. Captain Zorax, respond. But the 73 ships did not respond. They accelerated, forming a deadly spearhead intended to overwhelm the human corvette with sheer volume of fire. The Annihilator's weapons officer turned to Vexthor. Commander, if we don't fire now, the rogue ships... Cover fire, maintain distance. It was too late. The 73 ships opened fire simultaneously. The vacuum lit up with enough energy to vitrify a continent. Antimatter missiles, accelerated particle beams, kinetic projectiles, traveling at a significant fraction of the speed of light. The entire combined arsenal of 73 Imperial warships converged on the small black corvette. Vexthor watched, part of him expecting to see the human ship instantly vaporize, part of him fearing the opposite. The corvette activated its shields. It was not like Imperial shields, colorful and glowing energy fields. It was different. The space around the Resolute seemed to distort, as if reality hesitated to allow the attacks to reach it. The projectiles hit that distortion and simply stopped, their energy dissipating in cascades of hawking radiation. And the corvette didn't even tremble. Impossible, the science officer whispered. It absorbed the entire attack, all of it. No detectable damage. The 73 Imperial ships hesitated, their captains likely processing the same impossibility. In the vacuum, no sound carried their voices, but Vexthor could imagine the panic on their command bridges. The human corvette activated its ventral weapons system. The aperture the science officer had identified glowed with impossible blue light. It was not antimatter. It was not plasma. It was something fundamentally different, something that made the Imperial sensors scream warnings about spatial anomalies. And then it fired. It was not a beam. It was not a missile. It was a pulse of energy that seemed to bend space itself. It hit the 73 Imperial ships simultaneously, a spherical wave of force that expanded faster than conventional projectiles. Vexthor expected to see explosions, hulls being torn apart, crews being vaporized. Instead, something more terrifying happened. The 73 ships simply stopped. All energy systems shut down instantly. Engines, weapons, shields, life support, everything dead in a single pulse. The ships floated in the vacuum, dark and silent as tombs, but the Annihilator's sensors still detected vital signs aboard. "Report," Vexthor demanded. "The ships are intact, Commander." The sensor officer worked frantically. Hulls uncompromised, crews alive, but all energy systems are completely deactivated. It's as if the Corvette shut down every reactor simultaneously without damaging any structure. Vexthor felt his legs weaken. He understood the message. That was not a demonstration of destructive power. It was a demonstration of precision. The human Corvette could have vaporized 73 ships. Instead, it deactivated them perfectly without killing a single crew member. It was a lesson, a warning, a demonstration that the humans controlled technology the Empire did not even comprehend. The communication channel reopened. Sarah Chen appeared again, but now her face carried something beyond calm. It carried absolute authority. "Commander Vexthor, I have just deactivated 73 of your ships without harming a single life. That was mercy. If I had wished, every one of those crews would be dead. Your shields do not work against our technology. Your weapons cannot penetrate our defenses. And this is just a patrol corvette." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Behind me, right now, there are 400 human warships on high alert. Cruisers, destroyers, flagships that make the Resolute look like a lifeboat, and all of them are waiting for my order." Vexthor felt the coldness of comprehension. 400 human ships. If a single corvette surpassed the Annihilator— "But I won't call them," Chen continued, "because unlike your empire, we do not seek conflict. We do not seek conquest. We just want to be left alone. So I will make a unique offer, Commander. Withdraw your fleet, return to your empire, and tell them they found a race that cannot be conquered, not because we are stronger, but because we are more determined to protect what we love than you are to take what you desire." The silence on the Annihilator's bridge was absolute. Vexthor looked at his officers. He saw fear. He saw uncertainty. But he also saw understanding. They knew, just as he did, that they had encountered something beyond their capacity to face. "If we retreat," he said slowly, "the High Council will demand explanations. Then give them the truth. Tell them that arrogance almost cost 400 ships. Tell them there is a race in the galaxy that turned the art of killing each other into the perfect defense. And tell them that, by sheer luck, that race chose to show mercy today." Vexthor closed his 4 eyes. 300 years of conquests, 600 years of life, and in a single moment, everything he thought he knew about war was dismantled by a single human ship. "Communications officer," his voice was tired, "transmit to the entire fleet. Immediate withdrawal. Destination, Imperial border. Commander? There was shock in the officer's voice. You heard the order. Withdrawal, now. Slowly, reluctantly, the Imperial Armada began to pull away. 327 ships activated their engines and turned, leaving behind 73 dark hulls and a single black corvette. As they moved away, Vexthor watched the Resolute. It did not pursue them. It did not shout victory. It simply floated there, vigilant and silent, protecting the world behind it. And Vexthor finally understood the truth. Humans were not conquerors. They were survivors. And that made them infinitely more dangerous. The return journey to Imperial territory took 18 standard days at maximum warp speed. 18 days during which Vexthor barely slept, spending hours reviewing data, analyzing every second of the encounter, preparing for what he knew was coming. The summons arrived as soon as the Annihilator entered orbit of Cathara Prime, the Empire's capital world. Vexthor was to present himself to the High Council immediately. The Council Chamber was a structure that defied comprehension. Built by the first Imperial conquerors 6,000 years ago, its walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with the history of every annex system. The arched ceiling rose 100 meters, decorated with holograms of conquered stars. Vexthor entered alone, his uniform impeccable but his shoulders feeling heavier than they ever had. Before him, elevated on platforms that symbolized their authority, sat the 7 members of the High Council. Each represented one of the Empire's founding races. Each had lived for millennia through life extension technology. High Councillor Zarthun, an arachnid being of imposing size, was the first to speak. His voice echoed through psychic amplifiers that made the words reverberate in Vexthor's mind. Supreme Commander Vexthor, you return without conquest. Worse, you return with 73 deactivated ships being towed as scrap. Explain. Vexthor took a deep breath. He had commanded armadas for 3 centuries. He had faced deadly enemies in the vacuum of space, but standing before the Council, admitting failure, was perhaps the hardest thing he had ever done. High Council, the operation to annex human space was aborted due to unforeseen circumstances that pose a significant existential threat to the Empire. Murmurs echoed among the councillors. Existential threat. In 6,000 years, such a term had rarely been used. Continue, Zarthun ordered. Vexthor activated a holographic projector. Images of the Resolute corvette appeared, floating above the crystal floor. The humans possess technology significantly more advanced than our initial intelligence indicated. This ship, classified as a frontier patrol corvette, the smallest combat class in their fleet, demonstrated capabilities that exceed our flagship Annihilator. Impossible! The voice came from Councillor Morava, a gaseous creature contained in a containment suit. Our ships are the pinnacle of 6 millennia of development. A young race cannot... With all due respect, Councillor, the data does not lie. Vexthor played the recordings. The Council watched in silence as the corvette absorbed the combined attack of 73 ships without a single scratch. They watched as a single pulse deactivated the rogue Armada completely. This weapon, Vexthor explained, operated at a level of precision that our technology cannot replicate. It deactivated all energy systems without damaging hulls or injuring crews. It is a demonstration of quantum control that is beyond our current understanding. Zarthun leaned forward, his multiple eyes focusing intensely. And you decided to retreat, without consulting the Council, without attempting to flank or use alternative tactics. Yes, High Counselor, because the human captain informed us that there were 400 warships on standby. If a single corvette surpassed our Armada, facing their main fleet would be suicide. Perhaps she was bluffing. Perhaps. Vexthor allowed himself a moment of frustration. But was the Council willing to risk 400 ships to test that bluff? What if she was telling the truth? We would have lost an entire Armada. Worse, we would have declared war against a race that clearly possesses the capacity to bring that war to Cathara Prime. The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Councillor Velmora, a being that seemed made of liquid metal, spoke. Show us the historical record the human captain sent. Vexthor obeyed. The Council watched the history of the human civil war, the arrival of the devoured, and the systematic extermination that followed. When the video showed the devoured homeworld turned into fused glass, several councillors visibly recoiled. They eliminated an entire race, Moreva whispered. They did not conquer. They did not subjugate. They completely exterminated. And they did it in less than 4 years, Vexthor added. The devoured were an established spacefaring race, not primitives, and the humans wiped them from existence. Zarthun rose from his throne, his articulated legs clicking against the crystal floor as he descended to Vexthor's level. Commander, do you understand what you are saying? You are suggesting that we have encountered a race that poses a genuine threat to the Empire. In 6,000 years, such a thing has not happened. I know, High Counselor. That is why I brought this information immediately. Humans are not like the other races we have encountered. They did not develop technology for conquest. They developed it for survival against themselves. Their history is marked by fratricidal wars so destructive that when they face external threats, they apply that experience with terrifying efficiency. Velmora touched the hologram, magnifying the image of the Resolute. And you believe they have more of these ships? Captain Chen claimed to have 400 ships on standby. Our intelligence confirmed that humans have colonized 42 systems. If each system maintains a proportional defensive fleet, and if their flagships surpass their corvettes in the same way the Resolute surpasses our fleet, High Council, the humans may have superior military capability to ours. The shock reverberated through the room. Superior to the Empire. The idea was almost heretical. There's more, Vexthor continued, knowing he had to lay everything out. I reviewed our historical exploration logs. The Sol system should have been mapped 5,000 years ago during the Sector 3-4 expansion. But there are no records, no probes, no scout ships. It's as if the system was deliberately avoided. Are you suggesting, Zarthun said slowly, that someone in the Empire knew about the humans and chose not to report it? I am suggesting we need to investigate, because if someone found the humans before and decided not to annex them, there was a reason, and we need to find out what that reason was. Moreva floated closer, her gaseous form rippling inside her suit. Commander Vexthor, what is your official recommendation? Vexthor straightened, facing the Council with the full authority of his 300 years of service. Immediately cease all expansion toward human space. Establish a neutral zone of at least 50 light-years around their known territories. And most importantly, initiate diplomatic communications. The humans have shown they prefer peace over conflict, but they have also shown they are capable of winning any conflict we are foolish enough to start. Diplomacy. Zarthun spat the word out like venom. The Empire does not negotiate, it conquers. Then, perhaps it is time we learned. Vexthor knew he was risking everything, but he pressed on. High Council, in 300 years, I have never questioned orders. I have never failed a conquest. But this is not failure. This is wisdom. The humans did not threaten us. They did not demand tribute. They did not declare war. They simply said, "Leave us alone." And they demonstrated the capability to enforce that request. What if we are showing weakness? It is not weakness to recognize when we have met something we cannot conquer. It is intelligence. The humans have a saying, "Choose your battles." This is not a battle we can win. The council deliberated in silence for long minutes. Vexthor remained at attention, awaiting judgment. His career could end right here. 300 years of loyal service ending in dishonor. Finally, Zarthun spoke. "Commander Vexthor, your candor is refreshing, and your analysis, while disturbing, appears sound. The Council accepts your recommendation. Expansion toward humaner space is suspended indefinitely." Vexthor felt relief flood his system. However, Zarthun continued, "We need to know more. You will lead a reconnaissance mission, not military, diplomatic. You will make official contact with the human leadership. You will learn about their capabilities, their intentions, and most importantly, you will discover why our historical records are blank." "Understood, High Counselor." "And Commander, if you discover that the humans pose an active threat to the Empire, you are authorized to use any means necessary to neutralize that threat. Understood?" Vexthor hesitated. He had just argued for peace, but orders were orders. "Understood, High Counselor." 3 months later, a single Imperial vessel approached the Sol system. It was not a warship, but a diplomatic vessel, unarmed except for basic defensive shields. Vexthor was on its command bridge, much smaller than the Annihilators, accompanied by only 20 officers specializing in linguistics, science, and diplomatic protocol. The human response was immediate. "Imperial vessel, this is Earth Space Traffic Control. Identification confirmed. Commander Vexthor, you are expected. Approach coordinates are being transmitted. Welcome to the Sol system." Vexthor couldn't hide his surprise. They were waiting, as if they knew he was coming. The ship followed the provided coordinates, and for the first time, Vexthor saw Earth with his own eyes. The small blue and green world floated in the void, surrounded by orbital stations, construction docks, and the constant traffic of civilian vessels. But what caught his attention were the dark silhouettes in high orbit. Warships. Not hundreds, thousands. "Sensors officer, confirm count." The amphibious creature worked quickly, its webbed fingers flying over the controls. "Commander, detecting 3,400 military signatures in Earth orbit. Varied classes, from corvettes up to..." "High Counselor Preservus, that is a flagship. Estimated length of 12 miles. Generating power superior to anything in the Imperial database. 3,400 ships. And that was just in Earth orbit." Vexthor felt the magnitude of how severely the Empire had underestimated the humans. The coordinates led them to a massive orbital station, designated Unity Station. Vexthor and a small delegation transferred to a shuttle, disembarking in a docking bay where they were met by a human honor guard and by Captain Sarah Chen. She was in ceremonial uniform now, dark blue with medals Vexthor didn't recognize, but it was her eyes, those same calm blue eyes that reminded him how close they had come to disaster. "Commander Vexthor, it is an honor to receive you in peace." Vexthor bowed in the imperial gesture of respect. "Captain Chen, or should I use another title now?" "Captain is fine, although technically I was promoted to Admiral after our encounter. Turns out, stopping an interstellar war is good for the career." There was humor in her voice, and Vexthor found himself appreciating it. How many times in 300 years had he genuinely laughed? "Come," Chen gestured. "We have a lot to discuss." They walked through corridors that were functional, but not without beauty. Panoramic windows showed Earth below, and Vexthor saw cities glowing on the night's surface, vast oceans reflecting starlight. "It is beautiful," he admitted. "It is our home," Chen replied simply, "and we protect our home." She led him to a conference room where other humans were waiting. An older man in a military uniform covered in medals, a woman in civilian attire who carried political authority, and several others Vexthor assumed were advisors and specialists. The introductions were formal but cordial. General Marcus Williams, Commander of the Unified Defense Fleet; Secretary General Elena Vasquez, representative of the Earth Governance Council, and several others whose titles and functions were explained. When everyone was seated, it was Vasquez who spoke first. "Commander Vexthor, we thank you for coming in peace. We understand this represents a significant shift in Imperial policy." "A necessary shift, Secretary General. My High Council recognized that we severely underestimated your capabilities." "And yet," Williams leaned forward, "you came, alone, unarmed, trusting our word that you would not be attacked. That shows courage." "Or desperation," Vexthor answered honestly. "Our historical records regarding your system are blank. That should not be possible, and I need to understand why." Chen and Williams exchanged glances. Vasquez nodded, as if reaching a silent decision. "There is a reason your records are blank, Commander," Chen said, "and you deserve the truth." She activated a hologram. Ancient images appeared. So old, the quality was primitive even by human standards. 5,200 standard years ago, an Imperial vessel arrived in the Sol system, a scout ship, part of your initial expansion into what you now call Sector 3-4. Vexthor sat up straighter. So there was a record. Someone had been here. At that time, humanity was just beginning its first global civilization. We were primitive. We had barely invented the wheel. And that Imperial ship decided we weren't worth cataloging. But something changed, Vexthor said. Yes, the Imperial ship was attacked. The hologram shifted, showing images that made Vexthor rise from his seat. An Imperial ship in Earth orbit, under attack by something that looked straight out of nightmares. Organic space creatures, similar to the Devoured, but different, older. The Primordials, Williams explained. A race that preyed upon the universe long before your empire or our civilization. They arrived at Sol, pursuing the Imperial ship, and they decided Earth would be their next meal. What happened? Chen smiled, but it was a sad smile. The crew of the Imperial ship had a choice: flee and leave primitive humanity to be devoured, or stay and fight. They stayed, Vexthor whispered. understanding. They stayed, and they died, protecting a world that didn't even know they existed. But before they died, they transmitted something: knowledge, technology, warnings about the universe, and one message: survive. The hologram showed the final moments. The Imperial ship, alone against dozens of primordials, fighting until its last energy was extinguished. And then, a final explosion that eliminated the attackers, but also the ship. That transmission was received by some of the earliest humans who understood mathematics and astronomy. They didn't understand everything, but they guarded the knowledge. They passed it down through generations. And when we finally developed the capacity to reach the stars, we found the remains of the Imperial ship in lunar orbit. And the knowledge accelerated your development. Vexthor completed. Yes, we didn't copy everything. Much was beyond our comprehension, but it gave us direction. And more importantly, it gave us warning. You taught us, without knowing it, that the universe was dangerous, that we needed to be strong, that we needed to protect our home. Vasquez took over the narrative. The Civil War Admiral Chen showed it happened because some of us wanted to use the Imperial knowledge for conquest, others for defense. It took decades of conflict until we understood the lesson your ancestral crew taught us. Survival doesn't mean dominating others. It means protecting what we love. Vexthor sat down slowly, processing the revelation. 5,000 years ago, an Imperial crew had sacrificed their lives for primitives who didn't even know aliens existed. And that sacrifice had planted seeds that grew into the civilization now facing the Empire with superior technology. Your crew saved us, Chen said softly, and in honor of that, we preserved the wreckage of their ship. We studied their remains with reverence. And when we developed our own warp technology, our first mission was to find the Empire that had sent such brave explorers. But you didn't find us. No, you had expanded in another direction. And when we finally mapped your location, we decided to wait, to observe, to learn if the Empire that sacrificed an entire crew for strangers still existed, or if it had become something else. And when we arrived with 400 warships, Vexthor said bitterly, you had your answer. We had hoped we could find that Empire again, Vasquez said. That is why Admiral Chen offered withdrawal. That is why we didn't destroy your fleet when we had the capability, because we believe that somewhere, beneath 6 millennia of conquest, the heart of the crew who died, protecting our ancestors, still exists. Vexthor felt something break inside him. 300 years of certainties, of believing the Empire was supreme, of believing conquest was the only way. And all of it crumbled before the simple truth. His own ancestors had planted the seeds of the only civilization that could now challenge them. What do you want from us? He asked, his voice rough. Peace, Chen answered immediately. Trade, exchange of knowledge, and perhaps, eventually, friendship. But first, we want the Empire to understand that we are not enemies. We are what you taught us to be, survivors, protectors, and we are willing to extend that protection to allies. Allies? Vexthor tested the word. The Empire has no allies, only subjects. Then maybe it's time to change that, Williams said. Because the universe is bigger and more dangerous than any single empire. The primordials were defeated, but other threats exist. And together, the Empire and humanity could face them. Vexthor looked at the human faces around him. He saw determination. He saw hope. And he saw something he recognized from 5,000 years in the past, preserved in ancient records of long-dead imperial crews. He saw honor. "I will need to take this back to the High Council," he said finally. "I cannot promise they will accept it." "We understand," Vasquez replied. "Change takes time, but we offer our hand in friendship. It is up to the Empire to decide whether to take it." Vexthor stood up, and the humans rose with him. "There is one last thing I would like to see if possible." Chen nodded, as if she had expected the request. "Follow me." They led him through the station to an area marked as Memorial. Inside, floating in a gravitational containment field, were the preserved remains of an ancient imperial vessel. Its hull was charred, destroyed, but still recognizable. And before it, a plaque in dozens of languages, including Ancient Imperial. In memory of the crew of the scout ship Dakmar, who gave their lives protecting a world they never knew. May their courage never be forgotten. May their sacrifice teach us the true meaning of honor. May the stars keep them eternally. Vexthor approached the plaque, his 4 eyes focusing on the words. He knew that name. Dakmar, a ship lost 5,000 years ago, presumed destroyed by spatial anomalies, but not destroyed, sacrificed. "We honor their memory every day," Chen said, softly behind him. "Every human child learns about the Dakmar, about the crew who chose to protect instead of flee. They are heroes to us, and they always will be." Vexthor felt something wet in his eyes. In 600 years of life, he had witnessed glory and horror, but he had never felt as humble as he did in this moment. "I will take your message to the Council," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion. "And I will tell them the truth, that the Empire's greatest mistake was not underestimating the humans. It was forgetting the lesson our own crew tried to teach us, that true strength does not come from conquest, but from protecting those who cannot protect themselves." Chen extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting. Vexthor looked at it, then carefully extended his own hand, clasping hers. "To the stars," Chen said. "To the stars," Vexthor replied. And for the first time in 6,000 years, the Empire began to learn what the humans had always known, that survival isn't just about strength. It's about choosing when to fight, when to retreat, and when to reach out in friendship.